Let me tell you something. If you woke up this morning, that wasn't luck. That was grace. You didn't earn it. You didn't buy it. You didn't deserve it. It was given to you. Some of y'all been through storms that should have buried you, pain that should have broken you, losses that should have made you quit. But look at you, you still here. That's grace. Grace is the reason you're still standing when life tried to knock you down. You see, there were moments in your life where everything should have ended. You didn't have the strength. You didn't have the money. You didn't have the support. And yet, something somehow kept you moving forward. That something was not your willpower. It was not your intelligence. It was not luck. It was grace. Grace steps in where logic fails. It's the invisible hand that lifts you when everything in you wants to stay down. It's the quiet voice that says, keep going. When the noise of the world tells you it's over. Grace is not earned, it's given. It's not something you qualify for. It's something you receive because God decided you're worth it. Even when you didn't feel like you were, there were nights you cried yourself to sleep, thinking no one heard, but grace heard you. There were days you smiled for everyone else, holding yourself together while breaking inside, but grace held you tighter than you could hold yourself. You've been through things people don't even know about, situations that could have crushed your spirit. But grace said, not this one, not today. You didn't survive by accident. You didn't endure because you're just strong. You endured because grace stood in the gap when your strength ran out. When your faith wavered, grace stood firm. When your heart broke, grace whispered, I'll heal that too. Or grace doesn't just show up when things are easy. It's forged in the fire. It shows itself most powerfully when you're standing in ashes, staring at what used to be, wondering how to start again. Grace doesn't remove the storm. It anchors you through it. You may bend, but grace won't let you break. You may stumble, but grace won't let you stay down. You may lose things you thought you couldn't live without, but grace will show you that you can still breathe, still rise, still rebuild. To think back on your life, how many times did you say, I don't know how I made it through that? That's not a mystery. That's not coincidence. That's grace doing its quiet work. When people walked away, grace stayed. When doors closed, grace unlocked another one. When you were misunderstood, grace spoke for you in rooms you weren't even in. You thought you lost everything, but grace made sure you only lost what wasn't meant for your destiny. Grace doesn't always look like a miracle in shining lights. Sometimes it's as simple as a breath when you thought you'd given up, a second chance when you thought you'd run out of them, a peace that doesn't make sense in the middle of chaos. Some of you are walking proof that grace is real. You've made mistakes, but grace covered them. You've faced consequences, but grace turned them into lessons. You've been counted out, but grace counted you back in. Grace doesn't consult your past to decide your future. It doesn't ask permission to bless you. It doesn't wait for you to get it right. It meets you right where you went wrong and says, we're still moving forward. Grace has a way of rewriting your story without erasing your history. It uses your scars as testimonies, your struggles as evidence that God's mercy still works wonders. And when the enemy thought he had you cornered, grace reminded him, you can't touch what's covered. Every time you were supposed to fail, grace rewrote the outcome. Every time life said, you're done, grace said, not yet. There's power in that covering. Grace shields you from things you didn't even know were after you. There are accidents that never happened, sicknesses that never reached you, opportunities that found you even when you stopped searching, all because grace went ahead of you. You're not standing because life has been kind. You're standing because grace refused to let you fall. Grace is not a one-time gift. It's a daily covering. Every morning you open your eyes, you're wrapped in it. You take it for granted sometimes, thinking it's normal to be here, to breathe, to try again. But that's grace renewing itself for another round. Grace doesn't get tired of you. It doesn't walk away when you mess up. It's patient. It's persistent. It keeps coming for you even when you're running in the opposite direction. It doesn't need your perfection. It thrives in your imperfection. It doesn't look for your strength. It shows up in your weakness. Grace is God's way of saying, I know you're not perfect, but I still choose you. And maybe you've been through a season where everything fell apart and you wondered, where was God? Let me tell you, grace was right there. It may not have stopped the pain, but it preserved your purpose. It may not have prevented the tears, but it made sure you didn't drown in them. Grace was working when you thought nothing was working. Grace was fighting for you when you were too tired to fight for yourself. Grace is why you can look back and say, I'm not where I used to be. It's why your story didn't end in the middle of your worst chapter. There's something sacred about surviving. There's power in still being here. Every breath is a declaration grace won again. You were hit, but not defeated. You were delayed, but not denied. Grace gave you another sunrise, another chance, another reason to believe that God's not through with you. Grace is that quiet reminder that even when you've fallen, God still has a plan. You don't have to understand it. You just have to recognize it. Grace doesn't show off. It doesn't need applause. It just keeps showing up over and over again in the moments you least expect it and most need it. It doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, or how far you've gone. Grace has no expiration date. It will find you in your lowest place and lift you back to your rightful place. It will silence the lies that tell you you're not enough. It will rebuild what life tried to destroy. And one day, when you finally see how many times grace rescued you, you'll realize you were never alone, not for 1 second. Grace has been your shadow, your shield, your second chance, your proof that God never gave up on you. Your failures don't disqualify you. They position you for favor. You see, too many people walk around believing that the mistakes they made, the things they lost, the moments they regret, have somehow canceled their chance at destiny. But let me tell you, that's not how God works. The same failure you're ashamed of might be the very thing God uses to shape your strength. The doors that closed weren't punishments, they were preparations. The disappointments weren't rejections, they were redirections. You thought the loss broke you, but it was actually building you. Because grace doesn't erase your past, it redeems it. When you fail, that doesn't mean God is done with you. It means He's about to show you what He can do through you. Some of the greatest victories come from the lowest valleys. God specializes in taking broken things and turning them into blessings. That's His signature move. He takes your pain and transforms it into power. He takes your weakness and makes it your weapon. What you thought disqualified you actually became your qualification because you learned endurance, humility, and faith the hard way, and those are lessons success could never teach you. You ever notice how the people who shine the brightest are the ones who've been through the darkest seasons? That's not coincidence, that's divine design. Every failure stripped something off you that couldn't go where you were headed. Every mistake removed a layer of pride, of fear, of doubt, so that what was left could finally walk in purpose. The enemy wanted you to believe that your past makes you unworthy, but God said, tempt. That's exactly what makes you usable, because people who have failed deeply know grace deeply. And when you know grace deeply, you move differently. You don't judge people for falling, you reach for them. You don't quit when it's hard. You recognize that hard times are just the gym where faith gets stronger. God never expected perfection from you. He expected progression. He knew you'd fall. He knew you'd mess up. That's why grace exists. If perfection were the requirement, none of us would qualify. But favor isn't earned, it's appointed. And sometimes the appointment doesn't come until after the breaking, because it's in the breaking that your pride dies and your dependence on Him grows. It's in the failure that you finally stop trying to be the author of your own story and start letting Him write it. Think about Joseph, thrown into a pit, betrayed, sold, forgotten, and yet every setback was setting up his promotion. The same brothers who betrayed him had to come back and bow before him. Why? Because failure wasn't his ending, it was his elevation. Or think about Peter, denied Christ 3 times, ashamed, broken, yet he became the rock on which the church was built. That's what God does. He takes people who failed publicly and uses them powerfully. You see, when God puts favor on your life, failure can't erase it. The world may count you out, but grace counts you back in. And when grace steps in, What looked like a dead end becomes a doorway. What looked like embarrassment becomes empowerment. The same people who saw you fall will have to watch you rise. That's the beauty of divine favor. It turns your flaws into fuel. It uses your past as the stage for God's glory to shine through you. You might think, but I lost everything. Maybe that loss was God's way of clearing your path. You might say, I failed too many times. Maybe those failures were lessons that built the character you needed for the blessing that's coming. You might feel like you've disqualified yourself, but grace specializes in picking people who don't fit the world's qualifications. Because when the favor of God hits your life, people can't explain it. It's not about who you were. It's about who you're becoming. Don't hide from your failures. Learn from them. Don't curse your past. Thank God for it. Every time you fell and got back up, you proved that favor was still on you. Every time you messed up and grace covered you, you proved that mercy was working overtime. You didn't disqualify yourself. You just discovered how much you needed him. And that realization, that dependence, that surrender, that's where favor begins. So stop looking at your scars as signs of shame. They're signs that you survived what was meant to destroy you. They're proof that grace never let go. The world wants trophies of perfection, but God uses testimonies of transformation. And your story, every broken chapter, every bad decision, every dark night is being rewritten by his favor. What once embarrassed you will one day empower someone else. What once hurt you will one day heal someone else. Your failures didn't remove you from God's plan. They revealed it. You had to fail there to succeed here. You had to lose that to gain this. You had to fall apart so he could rebuild you stronger. Because grace never wastes pain. Grace never wastes failure. Grace turns every misstep into momentum, attempt. So if you're still breathing, you're still chosen. If you're still here, favor is still working. Tempt. Your failures are not your finish line. They're just the construction zone where grace is building your next victory. When you can't see a way, grace already made one. Life will corner you sometimes. No answers, no signs, no open doors, just silence. You'll stand there staring at a wall, wondering why nothing is working, wondering why everything you prayed for feels like it's on the other side of impossible. But grace doesn't wait for your understanding. Grace works in the unseen. While you're pacing the floor in worry, grace is already paving a way through the wilderness. While you're crying, God, I don't know how, grace is whispering, I already did. You've got to understand something. Grace doesn't operate in what you can see. It lives in what you can't. Tempt. Just because the road looks blocked doesn't mean it's over. Sometimes God will let you run out of options so you can finally learn to trust his direction. To grace doesn't need a door to open. It creates one. It doesn't ask permission from circumstances. It rewrites them. The mountain in front of you isn't a dead end. It's an invitation to witness what happens when grace shows up. You don't need to have the plan. You just need to keep walking. Because grace doesn't move when you see progress. It moves when you choose faith. Attempt. There have been moments in your life when you were sure it was the end. You didn't know how you were going to pay that bill, fix that relationship, heal from that heartbreak. You were staring into nothing but darkness. And somehow out of nowhere, something shifted, something aligned, something you didn't even expect came through just in time. That wasn't luck. That was grace doing its quiet, divine work. You didn't see it, but grace was ahead of you, working connections you didn't know you had, softening hearts you didn't even think cared, creating paths you couldn't even imagine. See, grace doesn't always come wrapped in light. Sometimes it comes disguised as delay, as disappointment, as detour. You think God forgot about you, but really, grace was rerouting you to something better. If he'd let you walk through the door you were crying over, you would have settled for less. So he closed it, not to hurt you, but to help you. Grace will sometimes protect you from the very thing you're praying for, because grace knows what you can't see, that not every open door leads to destiny, and not every loss is a defeat. Some losses are escapes. Some delays are divine. When you can't see a way, that's when grace does its best work. Because if you could see it, you'd try to control it. You'd try to force it, to manipulate it, to make it happen in your timing. But grace doesn't follow your schedule. Grace moves on heaven's time, always on time, even when it feels late. It's the unseen construction crew building bridges in the background while you're staring at rivers thinking you'll drown. It's the hidden hand of God turning obstacles into opportunities, pain into purpose, and endings into beginnings. You might be walking through a season where nothing makes sense. Every plan failed, every backup plan collapsed, every dream feels distant. But grace doesn't panic when you hit dead ends, it specializes in them. Grace says, this is exactly where I do my work. It's in the middle of confusion that clarity is born. It's in the middle of hopelessness that faith grows legs. God doesn't need a perfect path to bless you. He just needs your trust. And when you trust him, grace starts moving in ways you couldn't imagine. Think about it. The Red Sea didn't part until Moses stepped forward. The water didn't move until faith moved first. The same principle applies to you. The moment you take a step, even a small one, grace responds. You don't have to see the full path, just the next step. Grace will meet you there. You might not know how it's going to happen, but grace already wrote the script. You're just walking it out scene by scene. Every no you've heard, every door that's shut, every delay you didn't understand, they were all part of grace's choreography. Because sometimes God has to block what you want so he can give you what you need. When you look back on your life, you'll realize that the moments that scared you the most were the moments grace was most active. You'll see that the very thing that felt like a detour was actually divine direction. You'll understand that while you were crying for a sign, grace was already sending the solution. Grace doesn't announce itself, it reveals itself. And when it does, you'll see that every twist, every turn, every heartbreak, every failure had a purpose. Grace doesn't make sense until it's over. Then it's the only thing that makes sense. You may not see a way out right now, but grace already built one. It's hidden in the timing, waiting for your faith to catch up. Attempt. You're not stuck. You're being set up. You're not forgotten. You're being prepared. Grace is moving in rooms you haven't entered yet, aligning opportunities you haven't even dreamed of, working on hearts you've never met. That's why you can't give up in the dark, because grace is already working in the light. Tempt. You don't need to see the way. You just need to trust the one who made it. And the most powerful thing about grace is this: it doesn't need your permission to move. It just moves. It doesn't need your clarity, your understanding, or your plan. It just needs your surrender. Because when you stop trying to figure everything out and simply say, God, I trust you, grace goes to work. The same grace that parted seas, that moved mountains, that lifted you before will do it again. You may not see a way, but grace already made one. And it's waiting for you to step into it. God's grace doesn't need your perfection. It works best in your weakness. The world teaches you that you have to be flawless, that you have to have it all together, that you can't make mistakes. But grace speaks a different language. Grace says, I can't pour into what's already full of pride. I can only fill what's empty. It's not your perfection that attracts God. It's your honesty, your surrender, your willingness to say, Lord, I can't do this on my own. That's when grace steps in, not as a reward for your strength, but as a rescue for your struggle. Because grace is not impressed by performance, it's drawn to humility. There are people who think they've got to fix themselves before coming to God, like he's waiting for them to clean up before he loves them. But grace flips that completely. It says, come as you are, I'll handle the cleaning. Grace meets you right in the middle of your mess. It doesn't wait for you to get it right. It walks with you while you're still getting there. When you're broken, grace is your glue. When you're weak, grace is your backbone. When you fall, grace is the hand that lifts you, not the voice that condemns you. You don't have to be perfect for God to use you. You just have to be willing. Some of the most powerful people in history weren't perfect. They were deeply flawed, yet deeply favored. Moses stuttered, David fell, Peter denied, Paul persecuted. But grace turned their weakness into witness. That's the power of divine transformation. God doesn't choose the perfect, he perfects the chosen. He takes what's cracked and makes it shine. He takes what's bruised and makes it bloom. You think your weakness disqualifies you, but in truth, it's your invitation. It's where grace shows off. Because when you have nothing left to prove, that's when God proves everything through you. It's in those moments of breaking, when you feel like you've reached your limit, that grace reveals its strength. When you're too tired to pray, grace prays for you. When you're too hurt to believe, grace believes for you. You may think you've run out of faith, but grace says, that's okay. I've got enough for both of us. That's how good God is. He doesn't demand perfection. He offers partnership. You bring the weakness. He brings the wonder. You bring the cracks. He brings the light. You bring the failure. He brings the favor. We live in a world obsessed with image, with looking strong, with pretending we're unbothered, with hiding our wounds behind filters and fake smiles. But grace doesn't live in the image. It lives in the truth. It flows in authenticity. The moment you stop pretending to be perfect is the moment you make room for grace to move. Because grace can't heal what you're still hiding. It can't restore what you keep pretending isn't broken. God doesn't bless who you pretend to be. He blesses who you are. When Paul said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. He wasn't talking theory. He was talking reality. He was saying, I tried strength. I tried control. I tried doing it my way, but it was only when I surrendered that I found real power. You can fight all you want to hold it together, but sometimes God will let things fall apart so you can finally understand that His grace holds better than your grip. You think you're falling behind, but grace says you're right on schedule. You think you're breaking down, but grace says you're being rebuilt. That's why grace feels so unfair, because it doesn't measure you by your mistakes. It measures you by your potential. It doesn't look at what you've done. It looks at what God can still do through you. And that's why perfection isn't the goal. Connection is. Grace connects you back to the source. It reconnects you to the heart of God when shame tries to push you away. The enemy wants you to believe that because you fell, you're finished. But grace whispers, Tank, you're not finished, you're just forgiven. Maybe you've been living under the pressure to perform, to impress, to prove yourself. But grace is saying, tempt. You don't need to perform for me. I already chose you. I already love you. I already called you mine. You don't earn grace, you receive it. You don't chase it, it finds you. You can be tired, you can be messy, you can be imperfect, and still grace will show up. That's what makes it grace. It's undeserved, unearned, unstoppable. There's a freedom that comes when you stop trying to be perfect and start resting in grace. It's like exhaling after holding your breath too long. You don't have to hold everything together. That's God's job. You just have to stay open. Because grace flows through surrender, not through striving. When you let go of the need to be flawless, you finally make room for the miraculous. And the beautiful thing, grace never runs out. It doesn't keep score. It doesn't expire when you mess up again. Every time you fail, grace resets the clock. Every time you fall short, grace renews the invitation. You don't have to beg for it. It's already yours. You just have to accept that weakness isn't your enemy. It's your access point. It's the space where heaven meets humanity. It's where you finally realize that you don't have to be enough because God already is. So don't hide your flaws. Bring them to the altar. Don't mask your pain. Let grace touch it. Don't disqualify yourself because of your weakness. That's the very thing grace is looking for. Because the moment you say, tempt, I can't, heaven responds, good, now watch what I can. Grace doesn't need your perfection. It needs your surrender, your faith, your honesty. That's where it does its best work, not in the polished version of you, but in the real one, the one still healing, still learning, still growing. That's the version grace chooses every single time. The blessings you didn't expect are the proof that grace is real. Think about that for a moment, not the things you planned, not the victories you worked for, but the ones that came out of nowhere, the ones that showed up right when you thought it was over. Those moments when you said, I don't deserve this, or I didn't see this coming. That's grace. Grace doesn't always arrive with a trumpet or a sign. Sometimes it slips quietly into your life and rearranges everything for the better. You didn't earn it. You didn't chase it. It just found you. That's the mystery and the beauty of God's favor. It's not logical. It's not predictable. It's supernatural. Some of the greatest blessings in your life are not the ones you asked for, but the ones you didn't even know you needed it. The job that came after a rejection, the person who entered your life after someone else walked out, the opportunity that appeared after the door you were praying for slammed shut. Grace has a way of turning endings into entrances. It works behind the curtain, shifting things that don't make sense until suddenly they do. You may not have understood it when you were in pain, but now when you look back, you see how perfectly everything fit together. That's the proof. Not that you had control, but that grace was in control all along. Blessings don't always look like blessings at first. Sometimes they look like loss. Sometimes they look like heartbreak. Sometimes they look like detours that make no sense. But grace doesn't deal in appearances. It deals in outcomes. What you thought was the worst season of your life was actually the setup for your breakthrough. What you thought was rejection was protection. What you thought was punishment was positioning. Grace doesn't just give you what you want, it gives you what will grow you. It's the unseen hand of God aligning your story with your purpose, even when you don't realize it. The reason grace feels so powerful is because it often comes when you've stopped expecting anything good. When you've been through so much disappointment that you've trained yourself not to hope too high. That's when grace says, watch this. That's when favor starts finding you, not because you earned it, but because God never forgot you. There's something about surviving the wilderness that attracts the rain. You've been faithful through the drought, and now grace pours out blessings that don't even make sense. You're standing in rooms you never thought you'd enter. You're walking through doors you didn't even knock on. You're reaping fruit from seeds you don't even remember planting. That's what grace does. It multiplies what you gave up on. And here's the truth. Grace doesn't wait for the right moment. It is the right moment. It doesn't follow your schedule. It interrupts it. You can't predict it. You can't manufacture it. You can't time it. You can only be ready for it. Because grace will show up in a season you thought was over and remind you that God's not done yet. Just when you think the story has reached its final page, grace flips it and writes another chapter, one filled with favor, restoration, and surprises you couldn't have scripted. You see, unexpected blessings aren't random, they're reminders. Every time something works out when it shouldn't have, that's grace saying, I'm still here. Every time you avoided what could have destroyed you, that's grace saying, I protected you. Every time you stumbled into success without understanding how, that's grace saying, it wasn't luck, it was me. Grace loves to show off in impossible places. It makes rivers in deserts. It makes beauty out of ashes. It makes something out of nothing and then hands it to you as if it was always meant to be yours. Sometimes you wonder why you were chosen for certain blessings. Why doors opened for you that others couldn't reach? Why help showed up at the exact moment you were ready to quit? It's not because you were the most qualified. It's because grace saw you in your struggle and decided to make you a living testimony. You didn't find grace, grace found you. And now your life, with all its twists, turns, and triumphs, is the evidence that God's mercy is still alive and active. When you think about it, every breath is an unexpected blessing. Every morning you wake up, that's grace renewing its contract with your soul. Every time you laugh again after crying, every time you try again after failing, every time you love again after losing, that's grace proving that broken things can still bloom. The fact that you're still standing, still growing, still believing, even after everything you've been through, that's not normal. That's divine. You might look around and see people who seem to have everything figured out, but don't envy that, because what grace gives you is unique. It's tailor-made for your journey. The blessing that's coming for you is not generic, it's personal. It's the kind of blessing that has your name written on it, one that no one else can take because it was prepared specifically for your struggle, for your timeline, for your purpose. When grace moves, it doesn't just restore what was lost, it multiplies it. And maybe right now you don't see the blessing yet. Maybe all you see is the struggle, but don't let that fool you. Grace often hides behind delay. It's working quietly in places you can't see, preparing something bigger than what you prayed for. Because the same God who promised to bless you isn't going to stop at good. He's aiming for overflow. When grace shows up, it doesn't just give you enough, it gives you more than enough. Pressed down, shaken together, and running over. That's the language of divine favor. So when the blessing comes, and it will, don't call it coincidence. Don't call it luck. Call it what it is, grace. Because grace is proof that God still does unexpected things for undeserving people. It's proof that no matter how far you've fallen, how long you've waited, or how hard it's been, heaven still knows your name. Those blessings you didn't expect, they're not random. They're the fingerprints of grace all over your life. Grace isn't just what saved you, it's what's still carrying you. Every step you've taken, every battle you've survived, every moment you thought would break you but didn't, that's not just survival, that's grace doing its daily work. You think it was your willpower, your toughness, your discipline. But if you look closer, you'll see fingerprints of mercy on every chapter of your story. Grace didn't just show up once when you were desperate. It never left. It's been holding you together in the quiet moments when no one else could see how close you were to falling apart. It's the invisible strength under your weakness, the calm beneath your chaos, the hand that keeps pushing you forward when you're ready to quit. There's a misconception that grace is something that happened once, that it's a single act of forgiveness in the past. But grace is not a moment, it's a movement. It flows through your life like oxygen. It's what wakes you up in the morning when you didn't want to face another day. It's what steadies your heart when anxiety tries to pull it apart. It's what reminds you that no matter how messy life gets, God is still writing, still guiding, still working. Grace didn't stop saving you after the storm. It's the reason you're still standing after the storm. You can't see grace, but you can feel it. Attempt. It's there when you're weak, but somehow still showing up. It's there when you've lost everything, but still have peace. It's there when you've got tears running down your face, but strength rising in your soul. That's not coincidence. That's divine maintenance. Grace doesn't just rescue you, it sustains you. It's not a one-time rescue mission. It's a lifelong covering. You don't just get grace at salvation. You live in it, walk in it, breathe in it. Every heartbeat is grace saying, I'm not done with you yet. Some days grace carries you quietly. Attempt. You won't always feel strong. Sometimes you'll just feel carried. There's a weight that should have crushed you, but it didn't. Grace carried that. There's pain that should have left you bitter, but you still smile. Grace carried that. There's failure that should have buried your confidence. Attempt. But you got up again. Grace carried that too. You're not just here because you fought hard. You're here because grace fought harder. Attempt. It stepped into the moments you couldn't handle and held the pieces you couldn't hold. And here's the truth. Grace doesn't just carry the good parts of you. It carries all of you. The broken parts, the ashamed parts, the confused parts. Grace doesn't need you to have it all figured out. Tempt. It's not waiting for you to get it together. It meets you in the middle of your mess and says, let's walk through this. Even when you walk away from God, grace doesn't walk away from you. It follows you, covers you, and gently pulls you back over and over again. You can't outrun it. You can't out-sin it. You can't outgrow it. It's too wide, too deep, too powerful to leave you behind. Every single day, grace does something you can't see. It blocks attacks you never knew were coming. It softens hearts that could have turned against you. It closes doors that would have destroyed you and opens ones that lead to peace. Grace is working full time on your behalf, even when you're sleeping. Tempt. Even when you're doubting, even when you're giving up. You think you've been holding on, but grace has been holding you. Tempt. That's why you made it through things you didn't think you'd survive. That's why the burden didn't break you. Because you were never meant to carry it alone. Grace was underneath the whole time. Some people think blessings are the proof of God's love, but the real proof is endurance. You're still here. That's grace. You still believe. That's grace. You still have peace after losing what you thought you couldn't live without. That's grace. It's not about being untouched. It's about being unbroken. You took the hit, but you didn't fall apart completely because grace caught you mid-fall. That's why you can walk through fire and come out refined, not destroyed. That's why you can cry through the night and still rise with hope in the morning, because grace carried you when nothing else could. Even now, grace is still at work. It's guiding your steps even when you don't know where you're going. It's protecting your future from the traps your eyes can't see. It's preparing blessings that will meet you at the right time. You may feel like you're barely hanging on, but grace says, I've got you. You may not see progress, but grace says, I'm still working. You may not feel worthy, but grace says, attempt. You're still chosen. Grace is not a feeling, it's a force. And that force has been carrying you since the beginning. Look back over your life. You'll see a trail of divine interventions. Moments you thought were coincidences, but they were actually grace. The car that missed you by inches, the job that came just in time, the peace that hit your spirit when you should have lost your mind. That wasn't chance. That was grace catching you every single time you stumbled. You didn't get lucky, you got loved. You weren't spared by luck, you were sustained by grace. And when you finally understand that, something changes inside you. You stop striving so hard. You stop beating yourself up for not being perfect. You start walking lighter, talking softer, and trusting deeper, because you realize it was never your strength keeping you afloat. It was grace all along. You didn't survive because you had it all figured out. You survived because grace refused to let go. So no matter what you're facing right now, no matter how dark, how heavy, how hopeless it feels, remember this: the same grace that saved you yesterday is the same grace carrying you today. It's not finished with you yet. Grace didn't just bring you out. It's taken you all the way through.